we don't even have to go to the latest textbooks or anything like that. I'm actually learning from articles. I can go back to a journal from the 1950s or the 1960s, and there's a hell of a lot of insights in a lot of the old literature that is just, you know, has effectively been lost. But it's absolutely amazing how much of lost knowledge and what we consider a new discovery is actually really old hat. I'm in a few Facebook groups for doctors where there's several hundred doctors, and I ended up in an exchange today. And there were accusations about people talking about dietary management being guilty of fat shaming and so on and so forth. And the point that was made quite strongly was that by telling people that they should eat a certain way is actually going to be causing them emotional distress, and we shouldn't be doing that to our patients. And for me personally, we've got damn good evidence that eating a certain way will be healthier. I think it's actually akin to negligence, medical negligence, if we don't tell our patients this. And yet I ended up somehow in this online argument with some other doctors, and it wasn't just one isolated doctor who was saying, well, no, well, what if you tell them that they need to do this for their health? There was no argument that eating this way was good for diabetes. The argument was it would cause emotional stress if they couldn't follow it. The point I originally made was that we shouldn't be blaming the patient. We should be blaming the people who subject us to the dietary guideline. The amount of patients I've had who are eternally grateful for having had their lives turned around, because they've basically been subjecting themselves to, you know, self-induced eating disorders and exercise excess and so on and so forth to try and maintain body weight on an unhealthy diet as per the dietary guidelines. And the gratitude when they actually say, you know what, it doesn't have to be hard. I can do this effortlessly. I can control my carbohydrate, my sugar control gets better, my weight goes away, and I'm not continuously hungry. And the most rewarding thing is that when people will describe to me their relationship with food, they say, I now have a good relationship with food. I sit down to every meal and I savor every goddamn bite. I love it. And I know that it's healthy. Whereas previously, if you're sort of, you know, worried about your weight or what have you, or if you're in this different mindset, you don't look at food as a source of nourishment. You look at it as a source of calories that will make you fat. Go onto a healthy diet, and to be able to change that mindset, it's incredibly liberating. I see a lot of overuse injuries. So the classical case would be, so I don't just treat elite athletes, I also treat members of the general public. Mm-hmm. And the classical patient would be a middle-aged female who comes in with a stress fracture. Oh, so tell me about your activity. How often are you doing it? How far are you going? Okay. And we get out there, okay, I'm walking 15,000 steps a day, rah. Mm. And then the kicker, why? And sometimes they just look at me because they know well that I know why. But there's often this degree of awkwardness about admitting it. It's obviously for weight control. Why else does anybody exercise them into the ground while starving their body of nutrients so much that they develop stress fractures? If you're not an elite athlete training for a competition, why, you know, what need does, you know, the, you know, average middle-aged female have for exercise to this degree? Except if that her only understanding of weight gain and weight loss is a calories in, calories out hypothesis. We just have to burn all of this off. And usually that then opens up, and I say, well, you know, you've got a stress fracture, so you're going to have to curtail the activity. And that usually puts them into a state of despondency, because it's like, how on earth else am I going to be able to lose this weight? You know, you don't understand. If I don't walk for 6 hours a day, I'm going to keep putting on weight. This is the only possible way I've got of maintaining my current body weight. And then it's like, actually, no. Right. You can't outrun a bad diet. Doesn't matter what you do, it will always catch up to you eventually. There's another way we can do this. And you don't have to be hungry. You don't have to starve yourself to do it. And to boot, those stress fractures, which are probably contributed to by poor bone health, you know, which can lead to osteoporosis, so on and so forth. Right. We can actually reverse osteoporosis with nutrition. So, as an endocrinologist, you know full well about the drugs that we promote, with the bisphosphonate drugs, which actually, the way they work, so they actually impair bone turnover, which doesn't mean much to the general public, but to you, you know that if you have impaired bone turnover, you have bone that's vulnerable to fracture. We have these atypical fractures in the big thigh bone when people take these. In athletes who have been inappropriately given these for stress fractures, we end up basically, I've seen it end careers because they can never get over, because it stays in the bones. It stays there for at least 10 years.
Years and years.
Bone. It's, it's just an awful drug. And then we have other drugs which have side effects. And this is our standard treatment for osteoporosis, and we can reverse it. Well, so let me tell you about this study. So it was from 2002. It was by a couple of researchers, Dawson and Hughes. So they looked at a population over the age of 65, which to you says, well, let's go, and half of them were females. And you're saying postmenopausal females, you've got no hope. We can't fix your bones. So they gave them calcium citrate and vitamin D as a supplement, blinded, randomized.
Right.
And they monitored their bone density with DEXA scanning. So pretty much gold standard. And then they got intelligent. They did it quick. They said, we're going to stratify the study population by protein intake. So they put the study population into tertiles based on how much protein they were eating, lowest, middle, and highest. And they found that as assessed by DEXA scanning, over the course of 3 years, those participants having the highest protein intake with the vitamin D and calcium reversed their osteoporosis. Let's have a look at what bone is. So they're all necessary, because everybody thinks, okay, bone's made of calcium. You know what? Bone's actually more made of protein. Protein is the scaffolding upon which the calcium and other minerals can be inserted. And vitamin D just helps your body absorb calcium. So we sort of, we use vitamin D and calcium interchangeably insofar as this goes. So let's think, what happens if you have low calcium levels in your blood? Your body's going to go, well, I'm going to break down the bone. I have to just break down the protein to get to the calcium, to put a little bit of calcium in the circulation, because we know that without enough calcium in the circulation, you can get problems. And then if you put a lot of calcium into the system, you reduce the body's need to break down bone. And that's what we've found over many, many years. If you give people calcium, you can slow down or, put a pause on the degradation of bone. But you can't make new bone because you're missing the protein. Vitamin K2 is a fascinating supplement because it hasn't been well known for a while. The Japanese were probably as a country, the first country to start taking it seriously. It's also found naturally in cheese, and it's also found naturally in pastured produce. If you're having a bit of dairy and these kind of things in your diet, you're getting vitamin K2.
Right.
And the problem is vitamin K2 has a role in helping, I guess, to tell calcium where to go. Does it end up in blood vessels or does it end up in your bone? And as you know, there's some very good evidence that isolated calcium supplementation increases the risk of heart disease in females. I don't advocate for calcium supplementation. I think it's something that you probably should get from the diet. And you get it from a lot of food sources. People think you only can really get it from dairy, and there's a lot of dairy intolerant people. And I'll often use the example of, do you eat eggs? Sure. It's like, does a chicken have a skeleton? Well, the building blocks of that skeleton must be in the egg, right? So, I mean, from natural animal foods, we can get calcium. So, and you don't need to go having, heaps of dairy. The natural food that has a lot of it is the small fish with bones like sardines. They're very rich in calcium as well. But if you're going to have calcium, you need to be making sure that you get enough vitamin K2. And if we're talking about bone health as well, then magnesium is certainly beneficial. But the key point to this story is you cannot neglect the protein. And that's often something that is underdone. So the recommended daily range of protein is about 0.8 grams per kilogram per day, which is absolutely tiny. We've got studies where people actually have literally 5 times that amount without any detriment, as we can see on their biochemistry, their blood testing.
Right.
Routinely, we know that athletes, if we, we've got studies where we give people already very high levels of protein, 1.8 grams per kilogram per day, and then we increase that to over 3. And when we're having a look at their markers of muscle formation, we can see that that difference going up to 3 gave extra benefit. The upper limit that we have on protein intake is absolutely ridiculous. And this whole business about it being bad for the kidneys, well, it doesn't actually bear scientific scrutiny. It's never really been shown. And if we think about it logically, you're losing protein into the urine coming from the kidneys.
Mm-hmm.
So our response as a medical profession to saying, well, you're losing lots of protein now in your urine, you should eat less protein. Now, has anybody ever just stopped for 1 second? Like any medical student, when we're taught this, did we stop for a second and think, hang on, you're losing protein, so we give you less? Is that logical?
It's interesting because the entire world is hooked on this, right? Everybody believes that eating too much protein hurts your kidneys.
We've got some pretty interesting stuff. So we know that, the kidneys is an organ, like the heart. If you exercise the heart, your heart gets bigger. It's called athlete's heart.
Mm-hmm.
So we think that if you have a lot of eating a higher protein diet, your kidneys actually hypertrophy. The kidneys actually get larger. But that would suggest the kidneys actually have more functional capacity. Measuring the amount of protein in the urine, now that's a good way of assessing kidney function. And I actually really like that because we do reliably see that it drops. And there's a number of lines of evidence that demonstrate that low carb diets where you cut the sugar out, you lower your blood sugar, is actually beneficial. And if we take an example of a randomized trial, blinded study done in diabetics, they give them a supplement called carnosine. Now, carnosine is basically 2 amino acids joined together, and it's what we call a glycation inhibitor because it attaches to the molecule of glucose, and it stops that molecule of glucose then attaching to the cells of your body where it can damage them through glycation. Now, when we give diabetics this supplement, 2 amino acids, carnosine, we actually see that it actually reduces the protein in their urine and reduces their HbA1c, which is a blood marker of their average blood sugar levels. So we know that, kidneys are one of these first things that get whacked on the head. And this is not medical advice, but the doses used in the research is 500 milligrams twice a day, and it's called carnosine, carnosine. And I would point something out that the Latin root for the word flesh is carne.
Carne, exactly.
So this is actually deficient in vegetarian diets. It doesn't come from non-flesh foods. Vegetarians, more than anybody else, ought to be supplementing with this. And we seem to have this inability or this fear of letting people have concentrated urine. So as an athlete, we get them to pee on a urine dipstick and say, oh, it's not dilute enough, you must be dehydrated. And this whole fear of dehydration, which is just bunkum. And in actual fact, so what we actually did, we did a study at the Australian Institute of Sport. Well, what they found was that by telling people to drink more so their urine was dilute in the morning, they had to drink so much that they'll wake up in the middle of the night to pee, and the sleep disturbance was impacting their performance more than anything else. And what I actually tell people is, as you know, from medical school physiology, one of the first findings that the kidney is starting to lose its function, in addition to the traces of protein, is the loss of concentrating capacity. Basically means that your urine, normally you should sleep through the whole night, your kidneys are doing their job, and it will have very concentrated urine of a small volume that you don't need to empty out overnight. If your kidneys start to fail, they can't effectively concentrate, so you have to end up with much larger volumes, which inevitably will wake you up. So this whole notion that you have to drink and keep your urine clear, and if your urine's not clear, you've got a problem. No, the body's smarter than that. As I was told when I was a resident trying to calculate precise amounts of magnesium and potassium in intravenous fluids, the dumbest kidney is smarter than the smartest intern. If I had to pick a causative mechanism, a root cause, I think it has to come back to the liver. And some of the other justifications, we know the toxic effects of fructose in the liver. I mean, and there's several reasons for this. It's because the fructose cannot be stored as glycogen. It doesn't have that blow-off valve, if you will, where you can actually take a certain amount of it out of the equation. Where you have fructose, it's going to be processed metabolically by the liver, and if you exceed the processing capacity, then you stimulate de novo lipogenesis and fat formation in the liver. But the other line of evidence, which I find really interesting, is the fact that when we have oxidized oils, these oxidized oils will directly damage the liver, and they appear to directly contribute to insulin resistance as well. And so that's not an effect that's happening in the periphery, the subcutaneous fatty tissues or anything at all like that. And, you know, as we understand more and more about these other, you know, fancy chemicals like retinol binding protein 4 and these kind of things, and we've got these electron micrographs of, you know, oxidation damage in the livers of rodents. I think that the data is now becoming much more clear that the liver is the organ that we have to be looking after. But the beautiful thing is, the fat that you lose around the organs and the stuff within the liver, that is fat that disappears very quickly when you go on a healthy diet and lose weight. So even if you start out at 120 kilograms and you lose 10 kilograms, you're still quite overweight. But I can promise you there's a very good chance that if you're not metabolically healthy, you will be on your way to being metabolically healthy if we were to measure things like insulin resistance and glucose levels. It only takes a rather modest amount of weight loss for people to start getting these metabolic gains. And I don't know if you concur, but my feeling is it's all about the liver. We know that exercise is really terrible for losing weight. But when we do these DEXA scans on people, body composition scans, what we do see is a redistribution of fat. So we actually know that exercise, absolutely. Now, while I make the term, you can't outrun a bad diet for weight loss, it's absolutely rubbish. But for metabolic health, exercise is remarkable. And let's be fair, if it wasn't for exercise, all of our athletes, who by definition are exercising, they'd be diabetic much earlier. So we have guys like Tim Noakes, who was on an incredibly high carb diet, is the inventor of these energy gels. He knew more about carb loading than anybody.
Yeah.
And he probably did it better than anybody as well. He would have probably turned up as a type 2 diabetic decades earlier, were it not for his marathon runnings. Another interesting line of evidence is melatonin, which is a potent antioxidant. So most people don't realize that that's in the pineal circulation in the brain associated with circadian rhythms. Potent antioxidant. So they've got blinded studies where supplementing people with 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams twice a day reversed fatty liver disease.
Yeah, I heard about this. That's fascinating. Do you use it?
I do. Absolutely. So, I mean, I think that, look, the best thing is to reduce oxidative stress. And a couple of drivers of oxidative stress are fluctuating blood sugar levels, cut out the carbs, and any liquid fats, so oils. They basically oxidize. So if you can cut both of those out, then fine, you probably don't need it. But some people, for whatever reason, they have lifestyle reasons, say with families, they've got cultural reasons, they're still going to keep eating crap foods. In those kind of patients, I'll say, well, let's do a bit of risk mitigation here. And, melatonin twice daily is certainly, up there with carnosine for one of the good supplements.
Wait, melatonin twice daily? Did you just say?
Yeah, correct. So, and people are worried, won't it zonk me out in the morning? It doesn't seem to have that effect. Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously known as a sleep promoter. But I based my dosing off the science because that was what the studies that have shown improvements have used. So I think that's my justification. And very rarely will I have anybody tell me that it affects them. And interestingly, the people who tell me it affects them tend to be those guys who I suspect have sleep apnea. So I think that's just daytime somnolence from another cause.
Right.
Which actually brings me on to another quasi-interesting topic related to visceral fat. So the cause of sleep apnea, I mean, we used to just think it was the bull neck and all the fat around the airways here. It's actually the tongue. The tongue gets fat.
The tongue gets fat, yeah.
I was chatting to a butcher a while back, and he was describing to me Wagyu beef, and you're saying if you have a look at a really expensive Wagyu tongue, is saying the marbling, you can see it right through the tongue, and compare it to a normal beef tongue and there's absolutely nothing going on there at all. And we've got some MRI studies now where we've actually looked at the size and the fat distribution in people's tongues before and after weight loss. And you can actually see that the space in the airway just clears. So what's actually happening in people with sleep apnea is that when they're falling asleep, the muscles, the tone around the airways that helps keep the airways open, that relaxes a little bit. And if you've basically got this massive globular tongue in there, then there's no room, a little bit of relaxation and your airways occluding. And the big problem is, as you know, people aren't always conscious of the waking. So the airway occludes, they have a deoxygenation in their blood. So they get this arousal of their brain that just triggers them, sympathetic activation, just enough to say, oh, you better, tighten up the airway a little bit. We need to get some air through. So it's a partial awakening, but a lot of people aren't actually conscious that they're waking. They might be waking, tens of times every hour. Like they're just never getting into a deep sleep. They just feel absolutely awful. And this sleep deprivation also has impacts, and you'll know full well about the impacts that sleep deprivation has on leptin and ghrelin, two hormones essential for energy homeostasis. So you can sort of see that you get this cycle, you get overweight, and that leads to other effects that has this feed-forward effect that dysregulate these hormones and causes you to gain more weight. And it's very difficult to break this cycle. And I was absolutely fascinated when this study came out and we could actually see the tongue literally shrinking in size. And funnily enough, the conclusion of this paper was that perhaps we should be thinking about therapies that shrink the tongue. Maybe we could do cryotherapy and burn the fat and these kind of things. I was like, oh. So you demonstrated that you could shrink the tongue with weight loss. And then you demonstrated that that shrinking of the tongue led to massive improvements in sleep apnea. So the conclusion is that let's treat sleep apnea by, maybe surgery or something to shrink the tongue. When we talk about sleep hygiene, we talk about simple things. So the first and obvious one is I say to people, what time do you go to bed? And if they can't tell me a time, it means they don't have a regular bedtime. Mm-hmm. Or it means they're embarrassed because they know it's too late. So here's the thing. If I fly from here to Hong Kong, it's like 3-4 hours difference. I know that that will be enough to upset my body clock, right? 3 hours is enough to upset my body clock. And some people will go to bed at 9 o'clock one night and midnight another night. And they'll regularly have these fluctuations on a week-to-week basis. We know that if you go traveling somewhere, it takes about 3 weeks for your body clock to reset itself fully if you go on a transatlantic flight, for instance. So if you're constantly every night or 2 nights changing your bedtime, your body is in a constant state of discombobulation. You need the same bedtime. And then you need to give yourself enough time in bed. This business about, I can get away on 7 hours sleep. Yeah, you can probably get away on it, but you're not going to be functioning optimally. So, and I could point you to a lot of studies, but I won't bore you with the details. I'll just say it's got to be 8 hours. Let's just accept you've got to have 8 hours. And let's also accept that if you spend 8 hours in bed, you're not sleeping for 8 hours. So you need to allow a bit of fat on the bone. So maybe spend 8.5 hours in bed. That would be a good point. Now, let's also understand that the part of the body clock, the circadian rhythm that is most rigid, is the time you wake up. You often just wake up at the same time any day. That's hard to control. So, on a weekend, you're tired as, you've cancelled the alarm, and you still wake up at 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and you want to sleep, but you can't. So if you need to sleep longer, you have to go to bed earlier. You can't rely on sleeping in longer. So that's a very simple rule. Just pick when you are going to wake up, go back 8.5 hours. That's your new bedtime. And that is a strict bedtime every night with no little variation. Then we have some, things like temperature. People don't realize that the optimal sleeping temperature is about 19 degrees C. That's actually really cold.
That's really cold.
So, you get a nice doona, that's a perfect temperature to sleep in. They've got studies that show this repeatedly. And then if you share the bed with a partner, don't use the same doona. Have 2 separate doonas. But this is something I was first introduced in Scandinavia, and it makes a hell of a lot of sense because it puts an end to these Duna wars. And at night time, I mean, you're all about the hormones, so you all know all about these bright lights suppressing melatonin secretion. So at night, after a certain time, there is no overhead lights on. It's only lamps, and I prefer to have red lamps. And, if you've got to get up to, feed a child or something like that in the middle of the night, well, you can have red globes that are even better than just low wattage globes. So red light, it doesn't really suppress your melatonin as much at all. Put filters on your phone and your screens and things like that. So there's a hell of a lot of things that we can do just around our habits of sleep, focusing on temperature, habits, exposure to light, separate Dunas, that actually, for most people, will significantly improve their sleep. And because I really don't like drugs. So beyond melatonin, all these ones that we call the Zs or Zopiclone or Zolpidem or these kind of ones, they're, they can induce what we call parasomnias and people acting out their dreams, and they have side effects. We have the benzodiazepine class, which are, stimulate the same receptors as alcohol, and they tend to be addictive. They tend to, habit forming, and they lose their effectiveness over time as well. So people end up dependent on them, and they don't end up with any benefit. So from a pharmacological perspective, sleep is really a dead end. There's no effective strategies that we have long-term.